Everybody. I just wanted to make a few comments on your discussion posts for discussions one and two. And I also on D2L posted the leadership summaries that were good, very good, that brought together the things that you had talked about. And I also read through your replies, and I really appreciated the many things that you had to say. The one thing that came out for me as most important was this notion that we need to be able to define ourselves and our roles and what we're supposed to be doing in a way that we're clear about the trajectory of the services that we're providing, who's doing what, etc. The importance of communication and making sure that there is mutual respect, and that in our defining relationships with each other, that we pay attention to the important characteristics of what our jobs are and how they work together and how we collaborate to bring those things together for a better plan, for a better purpose, for a better focus for the students that we serve. So I really appreciated seeing the number of ideas that were brought forward. One of the things that I did want to comment on about the clarity of roles. I worked in early intervention for several years, and that's the birth to three programs, kids birth to age three. And the focus or the underlying foundation of early intervention services is transdisciplinary, not multidisciplinary, but transdisciplinary, or the idea that all of us come together with our expertise, but that we don't limit it just to our defined role. Meaning that we try as best as possible to not only work collaboratively, but that we also would work across boundaries, as it were, in supporting the kinds of things that the child needed. For example, I was taught how to use feeding protocols, how to help children learn to eat, how to work with moms and dads, and helping them with children and eating. I did a lot of work with helping kids in terms of their mobility, whether it would be helping a kid crawling or pull to stand or things like that, weight bearing. Those are things that the physical therapist, the speech therapist, others, as indicated, taught me how to do. So that when I worked with families, which I did a lot in the home, I was able to carry through the types of things that they were working on, as if I were a part of the PT team or the speech team or something like that. Okay, it might sound a little different to you because the types of work that we were doing is different than oftentimes what you find in the schools. However, here's what I want to say about it. I want to say that what I learned from that experience is that all of us bring unique talents and expertise to things that may not be within our own area. Like I was working as a social worker, but that didn't mean that I couldn't understand something about movement and helping kids move, or I couldn't understand something about speech production or things like that. Okay, here's the reason I just happened to think of it. It might be I don't know. Now I'm starting to think it might not even be that relevant. But here's what I took from it. What I took from it was that we all were part of a team, and we didn't wear hats like only the social worker can counsel a mother, or only a PT can help a kid with weight bearing, for example. While it might not be quite as relevant in the everyday school situation, theoretically, philosophically, what I really liked about it so much was that we saw ourselves as being all in, all available, that we all participated in providing the most holistic kind of support that we could for children. So I guess I bring this up because I've seen it where the opposite is true, where things are so compartmentalized. Only the psychologist can, or only the social worker can, or only the PT can. And that takes us back to the medical model where we're just kind of putting things in for a child. Like, here's this service, and here's that service, and then this service. And people are so within their own domain that they start, in a sense, becoming the expert at that, and then you're just supposed to let the expert do what they do. You may not have experienced this, but I have. And I was thinking about that as it came up when I saw a number of times about the idea of clarity of roles. And I thought, how is it that we can work together on teams to celebrate the expertise that we all bring, to share the information so that others can take forward things that we may not have known before, but because we've been trained, or we are being observed maybe by one of a different clinician, for example, who may come and see what we do to see if we're doing it correctly. I just want to come up with the idea, or I would just like to see, I should say, teams come up with the idea that we really should be more transdisciplinary, if at all possible. And that's hard to do sometimes because people do get into their own little areas of, that's my area, I'm the expert in that, or, So sometimes people get a little bit touchy about that, which is something that I think came up in your writing, which was the importance of how we communicate with each other and how we come together to communicate, how we work together to be respectful, to practice mutuality, that we learn to have like a common language across settings, etc. And as I was reading things about that, I started thinking about how you, as school leaders, could be a part of this journey and a part of this process of trying to make teams more collaborative and making teams work more effectively, if possible. I know that oftentimes, as somebody who goes to IEP meetings, I tend to see families and school teams operating. And oftentimes there's a bit of anxiety, a bit of tension in the air. And I always think to myself, why is it that we're not all feeling we're on the same team doing the same thing? What's this adversarial piece about? And so I think it's important that when we think about this with the work that you're going to be doing in the schools, that you might have an ability to do something about that, to help people become more flexible. People meaning our teams, our professional teams, helping them become more flexible, helping them to understand that the goal is really focusing on the child and the family, and that all of our ego needs to come out of that. Now, one thing too that about communication that I think is important to think about is, how is it that when we communicate, we do so effectively, and we do so in a way that is free of conflict. Not that conflict's a natural thing, it's going to happen, but I mean as free as the negative types of conflict as we can. How can we do that and make that possible? I would suggest something to you that I think is really an important characteristic of communication that has really helped me. And that is to keep everything task focused. Do not focus on the other person, focus on the task in hand. So let's say that a speech therapist is doing something in your classroom and you're not really sure that it's exactly what you like, or whatever, or the child needs is what I mean. It's not exactly that kind of thing. How is it that you would interact with this person to be able to make sense of your discomfort and keep things going, as best as possible, as it were? And that's when I move to task at hand. If you focus on what the goal is of the child, if you focus on the context of the child, if you focused on the environment in the room and what is happening with the child, etc., and then you make your points on that, not on why are you doing. I don't think this is. You should always come from a place where there is an opportunity to co construct new meaning or to co create new ideas. If we come with shutdown statements, like this, that doesn't really work, I don't understand why you're doing that, or that doesn't work for her, you've stopped all the communication. If you come at things from, I've been looking at the IEP and I've been watching her play and I've been seeing her do, blah, 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 blah. And when I saw that, it made me think of, and I'm wondering if we can. You're basically doing the same thing, but you're doing it constructively. It is the hardest thing to do when you're working with someone that, A, you may not really care for that much, may not be that kind of person you're get along with, or maybe somebody you don't really respect their skills. There's all sorts of things in there that could get in the way. And could you make you cranked up a little bit? When you take your ego out of it again, and don't make it about them and don't make it about you, make it purely about what needs to occur. And but I mean, when I say the task at hand, what is it? Like, let's just say a child's working on social initiation skills, okay? So all you talk about is opportunities that you've seen in the environment for this child to use these skills, ways the child has used the skills, something that you just read about it, I don't know, something that the mom or dad has maybe said to you. Those are the facts that you place at the middle of the table, as it were, and then you both work with the facts. And it really does help cut down on problems with, bad conflict. As I said a minute ago, I sort of corrected myself. I said it's not that you don't want conflict. In fact, conflict is highly desirable, really, in terms of the best decisions that can be made. Generally, when people come together and disagree and do so in a productive, professional, no ego kind of way, you generally come up with better answers. I mean, that's research. That's not my opinion. And so I always say it's not that you really avoid conflict, it's that you avoid personal assault, or, well, assault sounds like you hit them. Personal insults, that's what I think I meant. Yeah, like personal insults, that you avoid making it a me versus you, us versus them sort of paradigm. Those things don't usually work quite so well. So I would really encourage you to look at information out there about teaming, to look at information about how people can work more effectively in teams. And one of the things that you will notice is this idea I'm talking about of making sure that you only stick to what you're discussing for the child and nothing else comes to play. I mean, I always kind of use the like a medical model idea. A surgeon comes in and he just, I'm just making this up. He or she just wants a nurse that's going to be able to, do the surgery correctly. They don't have to be best friends. They don't have to golf together. They don't have to, whatever. They just need somebody who can do the job. They just need somebody who can and take care of business at hand, right? In a sense, it's the same for us. And now it's different in that we work together all the time. So we know people and we're friendly and hopefully, you find your school job fun and all of that because of the relationships that you have. But when you break it down to just the task at hand, or this is just the job that needs to be done, it makes it a lot easier to have conversations with others. I've had some experience with that this year. And it's interesting because I've been working with two different class teams, and there's been a lot of dissension, and a lot of things have happened, and all this other stuff. And I only go with the facts. I only go with this, that, and try to structure it so that the team can get along and things can move more quickly. and effectively toward better functioning. And it's not easy. I mean, like there was this one woman, and she drove me crazy. I mean, she really did. And also she was sort of the, as they say, the fly in the ointment. She was causing a lot of the problems, and I really kind of just wanted to tell her off and just tell her to stop doing what she's doing. But I know that doesn't work, and I know that that would be shutting the door to cooperation. And so I just played by my game of keeping things together. And I'm not saying, I mean, keeping the facts on the table and keeping things together in that way. And I'm not saying this in a arrogant way at all. I hope you don't hear it that way. But the principal in the school said to me, "You, how do you come out of these things unscathed? Everyone really likes you." Well, part of it is I don't work there all the time. So, I mean, let's get real. That's part of it. It's easy to dip in and out. This is some place where I work with my university job. But I did take that as a compliment, and what I said was, I don't personalize anything. Nothing. Nothing. It took years to get here, but I personalize nothing. If people say things to me, or in fact, that woman I was telling you about, I can't really stand. I know she's been saying all kinds of trashy things about me to people in the building, things that aren't true. Could care less. I just don't care. It's like I know they're not true. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to, I don't need to do anything. Just do my job, and that's always going to work out better. And I just know that in the work that we do in schools, sometimes these relationships really do become very personal, and it becomes harder to do that. And it will take leaders like you to set up the paradigm, again, framework, however you want to describe it, the ways and means of working together in teams, the ways that we communicate, the ways that we take care of our work together. It's up to the leaders to be able to set the tone for that and lay down the procedures by which we'll do things together. Otherwise, it just festers all over the place, and that causes obviously real problems, as you well know. One person, maybe more than one. I know that you were talking about your the co-teaching was another part of what you were all talking about, and my gosh, there's another area in which relationships really matter. um, but somebody was talking about developing personal relationships with people, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I would say, I will tell you that there is that's a slippery slope, and just be careful. When I was young, I was best friends with everybody at work, and then when things went wrong, or whatever, it got weird. It's kind of like I just had a beer with her last night, and now I'm pissed at her, or whatever it is. I have to say, I really cut down on my personal relationships in the workplace. Just because it just made it more difficult for me to be able to do my job in the way that I would like to. So it's just something that's just a personal thing for me. So I'm definitely not saying you should not ever have personal relationships, but just be careful, because sometimes things, when you have a personal alliance and then something happens professionally that's difficult, it can really throw things in the ringer. So that's just one thing to pay attention to. Um, the co-teaching piece, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about co-teaching. The number one reason co-teachers or co-teaching relationships don't last is because people don't get along. They have pet peeves and things like that about each other that they just can't seem to get past. Um, and I think it's inherent in the work that we have to really be able to um, look at ourselves, look at what is important to us, look at how we operate best, look at how we value the work of a classroom. All those sorts of things, I think we need to know very well for ourselves, so that if we are going to be in a co-teaching situation, we're able to articulate what it is that, sort of our, let's see what I'm trying to, there are, I don't know, not that you can't bargain them, but I guess they're kind of these are the real biggies that I got to have for me to feel good about this? Those kind of things. That's a word I can't think of. I don't know why I can't think of it. But if we're thinking that we can go into a meeting with someone that we're going to co-teach with and just play nice and say, what color do we want to do the bulletin boards, right? You're going to really be sorry you didn't set some things up front with people. Because it's really illogical to think that you can put people with completely different orientations and philosophies in a classroom and just assume that they're going to be able to pick up and start teaching together, because that's just not going to happen, or not very often does it happen. So make sure you know what those things are, okay? So I'll give you an example for me. I am really a big believer in relationship-based behavior management. I believe in speaking positively to kids all the time. I try really hard to not get upset about things. I'm not a yeller. I used to be all those things, by the way, till I was retrained by somebody good. But I don't yell at kids and stuff like that. I use a lot of positive noting. I tell kids what to do versus what not to do. There are things that to me are very valuable. And when I think about what those things are and how I see the world, if I'm going to be with somebody who is always negatively noting a student, that's going to be like really hard for me. So I'm not saying that you can't do it. I am saying, though, that it's best to put this all out on the table so that you and the other teacher can have a very healthy, very open, very honest dialogue about your teaching styles. Because, for example, if I were going to be working with a teacher who was constantly negatively noting students, I'm not going to intervene or like overstep my bounds and usurp this person and do things my way. I wouldn't do that. However, I'm not going to do things her way either, if that's the way it's going to be done. And I have one circumstance in which I was working for a period of time like that, and I had this conversation with another therapist, and she was very not happy about it. And I just said, I just don't practice like you practice. So I'll do my part. But anyway, it didn't last for very long. I'd go into more detail as to how it worked, but it's not really worth it. Except that I was so happy I said up front, this makes me uncomfortable, because then I didn't have to sit and stew by myself going, oh, like, shut up. That's what I wanted to say to her half the time. So it's really great to be able to have this, list of things, your characteristics, your philosophies, your values, all those things that make teaching what it is to you. It's very important you know what those things are, but more importantly that you're comfortable in being able to express those to someone else, and to be able to expect that your orientation to teaching, etc., will be respected. I have seen some teachers that didn't really care for each other very much and didn't have a lot in common, who did okay together actually in co-teaching. And I'm talking like in this last couple of years, I've seen this. It's not perfect, but basically, this isn't like this is by far not the gold standard, but they really agreed to stay out of each other's way on things that they didn't really agree upon, and it didn't generally affect the students. So I think that was probably the best way they could do it. But again, it's just really important that you're not trying to do things backwards, playing catch up when you're sitting in the classroom furious about something and wishing you had said something day one. It's really great to do that. I guess I'll just close with one thing that was said that I really can't emphasize enough myself, is valuing others' contributions and valuing other people's expertise. You will get more bang for your buck if you just do that. Just value contribution, value people's expertise. make a note of it. Make make it something that you do regularly. I mean, I know like one of the things that I try to do in my work is to notice what paraprofessional staff are doing. So often they're just sort of thrown to the class and, given things to do or I don't know, whatever. But, people don't necessarily, in my estimation, don't necessarily interact with them in the same way that they might a teacher, but I do. And I'm always looking at things that they do. I find ways to admire them for their contributions. I find things that they do well, and I say, oh my gosh, you're really good at this. You should really work on this skill. You should really work on doing more of this. Maybe you could work with another student, kind of like the one you have now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we are all going to be a team, we have to bring everybody along. And oftentimes when we do that, we're not really thinking about bringing our teaching assistants along. I went to do an observation one time, and I of a student who was for student teaching, and I came into the room and I was sitting and I was watching and everything, and as I was getting ready to leave, I went up to the paraprofessional who was there, and I said, thank you so much for letting me come in. And she's like, you're welcome. And I handed her my business card, and I said, if there's anything that any kind of comments that you have about the student or anything that you'd like me to know, I'd really appreciate it and stuff. And I'll never forget this. She goes like this: I'm a paraprofessional, or whatever. I don't. She may have called herself aide or something, but I'm a paraprofessional. I said, yeah, I know. And she goes, you, no one's ever given me a card before. And I said, well, you're in the classroom and everybody else is here and you're a part of it like everybody else. So if you have something that you do, she goes, this is amazing. Thank you. I've never gotten a card. Thank you so much for that. She was so like overwhelmed that some guy gave her a business card. Well, I didn't know that she would have much to share with me. I didn't know if she would or she wouldn't. But, it'd be sort of like having somebody sitting at your dinner table but not offering them food. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, you're a professional here. So, of course, I want to acknowledge your contribution, your expertise, which is what I was trying to do. So, it's simple things like that oftentimes. And I'm talking to you now, like, because you're going to be leaders. It's simple things like that oftentimes get us the best outcomes is simply by noticing and simply by rewarding people for the things that they do, the things that they do well, and for the fact that they are doing their best, their level best, to be a part of a team and to work in circumstances that oftentimes are a little complicated, can have a little tension and things going on, but being able to stay with that for the best interests of the child, for the best interests of the team, and for the fact that we all want to work together in a way that our best comes out, it's important to do that. So I hope that you'll make a note of it. Okay? Thanks a lot. I really appreciated very much your responses. It was a good read.